Good evening, people, and welcome to a talk on pirates. We'll be beginning in a few moments.
The world was expanding through colonization and migration. The economy was terrible to say the least, but trade was improving. No, I'm not talking about our current time, but this was Europe in the 17th century. Countries were recovering from a terrible war that had lasted for years, ships overflowing with treasure set out through the seas. In such times of unemployment, crowding, and poverty, gaining power, freedom, and quick riches seems like quite a sweet deal, right? Despite the part about being an outlaw and a criminal. Enter pirates. Thousands of pirates were active during what is called the golden age of piracy. And the pirates we know now are reflections of these fashionable plunderers of the high seas. There was a wide spectrum of opinions about these pirates, published as powerful and well-dressed. People would talk about the latest exploits of Bartholomew Roberts and Blackbeard in crowded coffee houses with much excitement. But pirates were not monsters of the seas, terror and scum as they are thought of. They were average seamen who had grown tired of the backbreaking work for little pay and the abuse they suffered in the merchant ships and navies. They wanted a comfortable life, money to spend, rum to drink, and to eventually be merchants and planters in their own right. Across the Atlantic, in the New World, there was lots of gold, but those coasts were occupied mainly by Spanish and Portugal fleets. The European rulers needed the gold and those foreign ships destroyed. But how? The Royal Navy and other navies were largely unorganized at the time and not in any state to win any wars. Also, the crown would preferably not take responsibilities for these attacks and blame it on lawless pirates. So they hired experienced sailors and strong men to attack and steal from their enemies. By hired, I mean they were snatched from the road on their way home and stuffed on a ship for many, many years. These men were called privateers. And these privateers were given a share of the loot they stole. Piracy was legal as long as you had purchased the license and shared the booty with the licensee. But of course, this didn't last, and the European rulers abandoned these men and stopped using privateers for their activities. Eventually, these privateers deserted their countries and stole from whatever caught their eye, illegally and with swagger. It was a time when all important sea trade routes were constantly impacted by enormous numbers of notorious sea robbers. So, could a meager crew take down a ship entirely filled with treasure and make out with enough loot to last a lifetime? Yes, they could. Because these pirates were more lawful and disciplined than one could imagine. Also, more often than not, the treasure-carrying ships would surrender when they see the Jolly Roger, the pirate flag flying, because of the terrible stories they had already heard about the pirates. A pirate's life was not always glamorous or romantic as in the movies. If caught on land, they were punished by death, decapitation, or even gibbeting. For crimes committed on the ship, punishments such as walking the plank and keel hauling were common. But each ship had laws. the pirate code, and a democratic way of handling things. The crew voted for their captain and quartermaster, and on a ship, there was no such thing as a member of the privileged class. Surprisingly or unsurprisingly, there was more gender and racial equality on a pirate ship than on land at the time. Some of the pirates were slaves sold to work on the ship or runaway slaves, but both the white pirates and black slaves fought for survival as free men, and their common purpose diffused any racial differences. On land, laborers were starving with no pay, and women still didn't have any voting rights. But on sea, all pirates voted for their captain and had the right to bear arms. There was equal division of booty and equal rights to fair and legal justice as per the pirate code. The Spanish dollar was used as currency. Cut up in pieces, it was worth its weight in metal. So, what about those pirates who had to sacrifice a hand or a leg in their brave fight for treasure? Free health insurance, that's one. The loss of a right hand was worth 600 pieces of weight, and the left hand was worth 500. The pirate codes were revolutionary for taking power away from any one person and placing it in the hands of the majority. However, the golden age of piracy was coming to an end in the middle of the 18th century when people like Woodes Rogers caught and executed pirates ruthlessly in the Caribbean. Many pirates retired as anti-piracy laws were established and military presence was increasing. When we think of pirates, we think of cutlass and rum and eye patch. But beneath all that, there was this freedom fighter, a liberal, and a revolutionary thinker. Sure, there were also all criminals who stole from others to make a living, but they not only had the courage to defy their country, but also made good use of the freedom they gained. Long before American or French revolutions, pirates were living, more or less, according to the principles of freedom, equality, and liberty. The dangers of living the high seas life was compensated by the independence they gained and camaraderie they shared with their shipmates. This is the allure of pirates that draws us to them even now.
So let's take a look at a couple of pirates who are represented by this very allure: Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Anne Bonny was a female pirate who operated in the Caribbean during the mid 1700s. She was the illegitimate child of William Cormac and his servant woman Mary Brennan. After losing her mother in her late teens, Anne had to take care of her father's household. She had a difficult time adjusting and, at the age of 13, reportedly stabbed a servant girl. Hey, don't judge. We all have our coping mechanisms. When she was 16 years old, she fell in love with a small time pirate, James Bonny. Her father was against their relationship, but she was stubborn and married him. However, this didn't last long, and Anne fell in love with another pirate, Calico Jack Rackham. Rackham was so smitten, he even offered to buy her from James. Jack and Anne stole a ship, assembled a crew, and began their life of crime on the high seas. Along with a dozen others, the pair started pirating merchant vessels along the coast of Jamaica. Talk about a power couple. Rackham's decision to have Bonny accompany him was highly unusual, as women were considered bad luck aboard ship. While Bonny did not conceal her gender from her shipmates, she disguised herself as a man and participated in armed conflict. Accounts differ on when her female compatriot Mary Read joined the crew. Born in England towards the end of the 17th century, Mary was the illegitimate daughter of a young widow. Her mother dressed her in men's clothing in a ploy to extort money from her paternal grandmother, who apparently hated girls. Some state that Reed, who served as a mercenary disguised as a man, was among the original hijackers of the William, the ship that Anne and Jack had stolen. Bonny saw through her disguise and they became close friends. Initially, Rackham was jealous of Anne's relationship with Mary, and one day burst into her cabin intending to slit her throat. But upon realizing Mary's true identity, Rackham agreed to keep her secret from the rest of the crew and continued to treat her as an equal. The exploits of the crew aboard the William had not gone unnoticed by the governor, who soon sent Privateer Jonathan Barnett in pursuit. Near midnight on October 22nd, Anne and Mary were on deck when they noticed a mysterious ship gliding up alongside them. They realized it was one of the governor's vessels, and they shouted for their crewmates to stand with them. A few obliged, Rackham included, but several had passed out from the night's drinking. Jonathan Barnett caught up with the William at Negril Point, and the crew was captured and brought to Spanish Town, Jamaica for trial. Rackham was scheduled to be executed by hanging on November 18th, and his final request was to see Anne. She had but one thing to say to him: "If you had fought like a man, you need not have been hanged like a dog." 10 days later, she and Mary stood trial at the Admiralty Court in Jamaica, both of them pleading not guilty to all charges. The most convincing witness was Dorothy Thomas, whose canoe had been robbed during one of the pirates' sprees. She stated that Anne and Mary threatened to kill her for testifying against them. They were found guilty and sentenced to be hanged, but their executions were stayed because, as Lady Luck would have it, they were both quick with child. Mary Read is believed to have died some months later, at about the time she would have given birth, and she's likely buried in Jamaica. The fate of Anne Bonny is unknown. Their fate aside, both of them were in the Caribbean, a place that immediately pops in our minds when we think of pirates. However, it's not like the rest of the world didn't face any piracy. We are now going somewhere that's far away from Jamaica.
We all know about pirates like Jack Sparrow or Blackbeard. But what about a badass pirate because of whom the entire coastline population had to be relocated? Ah, yes, we're talking about the legends from China. When people think of pirates in China, they're most likely to think of intellectual people who are well versed in math, with usually an abacus instead of a hook. Piracy has been prevalent in South China for centuries. There is a long history of how they took a major toll on the politics and the economic condition of the country. As the South China Sea is where most of the major trade ships pass through, piracy had to be stopped. Now let's go back in time. In the early 1700s, when piracy was somewhat diminished due to the stringent sea laws, a few decades later, the army began to fall. This is when the most famous and dreadful pirate queen of all time rose, Qingxi. What a woman! Once a prostitute to becoming a person the entire Chinese government feared. When the pirates had lost their chief commander, they were in deep trouble as they needed someone powerful to rule them. Their ex leader was one of the greatest leaders they had ever had. So filling his shoes was definitely not an easy task. Qingxi was not afraid though, so she stepped up and decided to lead the confederation. The other commanders weren't really surprised by this, as she did manage their business operation. So now, as a new commander, she started building her fleets and started planning small attacks on trade ships. Somehow, she was not very satisfied with the wealth she had gained. Well, no one ever is. So she started threatening villages. These villages had a choice. They could either pay up or they could burn down. Well, not really a choice. The king at the time had neglected the sea laws. The navy were ignorant and didn't really cross land to stop these pirates. Ironic, as China recently violated all border laws. These pirates slowly rose to power. They had built an underworld culture of disconnection. They had their own rules and they rebelled all the others by the officials on land. This is when things got a little nasty. One of the pirates had murdered an army official. The king had just had enough of the ruckus these pirates had caused. So he assigned a new commander, Bailing. Bailing was asked to rid the sea of their looters. Around this time, Qingxi was planning her biggest attack yet. Talk about bad timing for Bailing. Qing had ordered her fleet to annihilate the entire coastline. For a whole year, she had sacked up the entire delta and slaughtered anyone who resisted. These villages were literally burned alive. By the end of the year, they had nearly killed 10,000 people. By now, these villages were used to the foul smell of cannons and the cries of their neighbors. Bailing knew that this was getting out of hand, so he had to do something. He also knew there was no way he could take them on himself. So he stooped in and asked for foreign help. And by foreign, I obviously mean the British. The Britishers had to do something, as this affected their drug trade. China at the time was a hotspot for drugs, and nearly everyone were addicts. So the Britishers hatched a plan. They started with relocating the people who lived along the coast. These pirates had caused so much damage that these villages had to be sent 16 kilometers inland. Then the British, along with the Portuguese army, surrounded the pirates and started an open fire. The war between the pirates and the British went on for weeks. Finally, the pirates had no choice but to give in. Chingshi, being the gold digger she was, fled during the war and started her own gambling business in a small town. And hence, once known as the most powerful reign of pirates, had come to an end. After all that China has been through, they still don't have laws for piracy. This makes it impossible for them to prosecute pirates for piracy charges. For example, a few years ago, few Chinese men were executed for hijacking and murdering a crew. While they were actually convicted of murder and robbery. While this is an effective punishment, it does not apply over international waters. So now that we just saw that there were pirates who defied all standards, this isn't limited to real life. They also happen to be a huge part of pop culture. So let's take a look at how we perceive them in today's media.
Ahoy, mates! Can you believe it that we are already into October? This can mean only one thing, that it's Halloween time. From a poll that we conducted last week, we realized that most of us want to dress up as pirates. Just kidding, we didn't really have a poll. Even then, pirates it is. Have you ever wondered why we have been attracted to pirates so much, even though they're supposed to be marauding and looting us? The answer to this lies in the 200 years of pop culture that is responsible for romanticizing these figures hovering over the edge of law. From the early 1800s, famous writers have written many novels based on piracy. Robert Louis Stevenson has given us The Treasure Island, one of the most influential pieces of pirate fiction. It is responsible for many of our current perceptions of pirates, including elements such as treasure maps with an X, tropical islands, one legged people with parrots perched on their shoulders. Pirates have had a huge influence on the music culture as well. A very famous British rock and roll group called Johnny Kidd and the Pirates got so inspired by the pirates that they used to wear eye patches while performing, just as a tribute. They have released many pirate related songs and albums which were a super hit during their period of time. This entire concept has captivated people's imaginations since the Victorian era, and this helped in paving the way for piracy to creep into cartoons for kids and movies for adults. Many famous cartoons, like Jake and the Neverland Pirates, revolves around a group of tiny pirates trying to look for treasure on an island, and of course, Captain Hook trying to hold them and stop them from stealing it. This rivalry between the privateer groups has provided us with constant drama for the entire storyline. The very famous show called SpongeBob SquarePants, a children's show, also shows the main character idealizing Patchy the pirate. He's the guy who used to make us yell, "Aye, aye, Captain," in the beginning of the theme song. Have you realized that he never used to say it? And this is because he has only one eye. Anyway, most of you did not know his name, so you're welcome for it. Now, if you've ever visited Disneyland or any other theme park, you would have noticed that there are sections for famous movies or series over there. For example, there is an entire part of the theme park just reserved for Toy Story, which was made after the movie was a hit. Fun fact, Pirates of the Caribbean, the movie series, is based off of the attraction on the theme park, and it's not the other way around. It had the same name, but luckily it's the other way. Speaking about the movie, Johnny Depp's alter ego in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies is one of his best roles till date. Right from his boozy charisma to his loosely fitted clothes to his baggy eyes with the dark circles, he creates a memorable privateer. Another interesting character is Elizabeth Swann. Now we have seen her transformation throughout the three films, right from her being a young girl to transforming into a proper lady and finally into a courageous pirate. With her natural leadership qualities and innate talent of battle strategy, she proved herself to the crew and became Pirate King. So, the entire point to note here is that she became the king. Hence, her depiction is very impactful for women. Her journey to success is very badass and has served as an inspiration not only to me but to many other young girls out there. Buccaneers were popular even among the Japanese. One Piece is a famous manga which has been instrumental in spreading the story and culture of these buccaneers. It is the most popular manga to date in Japan. With serializations, spin offs, and a Netflix live action show in the making, it has definitely left a mark in Japanese cinema. These bloodthirsty people are portrayed as goofy characters in cartoons, but in real life, they're very dangerous and smart. I mean, they wouldn't make members of their crew walk the plank because it was barbaric, but they would not do that because it was not barbaric enough. So, if they wanted to kill you, they would probably torture you in the worst possible way and then kill you. Although it sounds like a very dangerous thing and they sound like very dangerous bunch of people to hang out with, they are pretty fun as long as you are not a traitor. They would not murder each person who had a difference of opinions. Instead, the entire crew would vote for it and the majority ruled. That's how captains were overthrown, not by bloody battles to death. Democratic much? Definitely not what we thought these uncultured and savage pirates would do. As you can see in the next picture, there is a parrot once again. Do you know why pirates have parrots? It's totally only because they want to show off. So parrots are sold for a very high price in the markets of London, and hence the pirates like to round them up. Now, the next thing which you think about is why do the parrots always return to their master's shoulders? That is because there is no land nearby, which is why they can never really escape. This is like the most sadistic thing to do. Just put a parrot on a ship. It's free to fly, but it's still captive, right? Because it's not like he can go anywhere. So, we shall move to the next myth, which is the eye patches. I mean, it's weird and shady, right? It's not because all the pirates have lost an eye in battle. There is a very scientific reason behind this. Basically, it takes 25 minutes for our eyes to adjust in the darkness, which is a long period of time for someone who has to steal in the dark. Hence, by wearing a patch over their eyes for years, they have adjusted their eyesight so they can look in the dark much better and faster. Now, the next thing which is associated with pirates is the treasure, right? I mean, all pirates go looking for treasure. It is sad that in reality, only one treasure trove has ever been found, the Vidas. So, if you're planning to go steal some ancient jewels, you should rather go to a museum because your chances of stealing from there are higher than on some random ass island in the middle of nowhere. However, piracy is not all that disappointing. Have you ever noticed how the pirates in movies or series just break into song all the time? This happens in real life as well. Piracy isn't all pillaging and plundering. Sometimes it got really boring. So, to amuse themselves, they drank, they gambled, they sang, they danced and put on plays. Finally, I would like to say that yes, pirates are overrated, but I don't see why they shouldn't be. Since pirates are talked about in pop culture so much, we have had many preconceived notions in our mind regarding them. So they are never truly understood.
Up until very recently, I had this belief that pirates existed only in one part of the world in a very specific period. But this belief couldn't be further away from reality. Well, piracy indeed flourished in the 17th century, primarily in the Caribbean. There are still pirate attacks happening to this day, right below this very subcontinent in the Indian Ocean. Piracy in the Indian Ocean has a very long history. And like every other thing that is wrong with the subcontinent, the Europeans started it. It began with the Portuguese reaching India and establishing commercial centers here. Soon after, the Dutch, the French, and the British followed. Now, this made the Indian Ocean a convenient target for people looking to plunder ships, and that's exactly what happened. Along with traders who came from all parts of the world, also came pirates. In many stories and books, these pirates who came to the East are depicted as living extravagant lifestyles. They were supposedly living comfortable lives with guards to protect them in their fancy homes, where they lived with their multiple wives and children, wearing jewelry and drinking alcohol that they looted. Documents and news articles of the time show that this image is far from the truth. These pirates were the same as any other pirates in the world who had to resort to murder and looting because of poverty. Pirates who came to the Indian Ocean looking for opportunities to loot needed a place to temporarily settle down. Many of them found a haven in the islands close to Madagascar. This might be because not many British officials were stationed there, and also the weather is quite nice. During the stay on these islands, pirates spent most of their time selling their booty so they wouldn't be arrested for holding it. In many cases, they kidnapped ships to these islands to stop other ships from following them. Once they reached their temporary homes, they dealt with their victims in a very brutal way. They killed them, burned them, cut their noses off, or just left them in the open air to die under severe conditions. Now, what we would expect is that this barbarism to have ended in the modern day and age, right? Well, that is true to a certain extent. Pirates still exist today, but instead of using a cutlass and a musket, they use an AK-47 and rocket launchers. Sea piracy in the 21st century is still prevalent because of the same reason it began, poverty. But now, another major factor has been contributing to creating pirates, political violence. Countries involved in political violence lack the economic ability to fight piracy. And since they are economically backward, unemployment is very common in these countries, which then forces its citizens into becoming pirates. For example, the Somalian coast is one of the most dangerous places on the planet. Because of the loose government structure and the struggling economy, many Somalis have recently turned to crime. Even though Somalia is a considerably small country, it's got the largest coastline in Africa and its waters are very busy. Now, these are ideal conditions for people looking for a job in the pirate sector. Pirate attacks are causing a lot of damage to the people involved in sea trade. That is true, but it's hard to believe that they've actually acted as a business opportunity for many people in the mainland. Insurance companies have earned a lot of money just by hiking the rate premiums in response to pirate attacks. Pirates even have investors who provide them with resources in an informal market. And if the next attack becomes successful, these pirates earn a lot. So the next time you have a little extra money lying around, don't invest it in Apple or Tesla. Just buy someone a few hand grenades in Somalia. This might be illegal, but trust me, the profit margins are way higher. Piracy is one of the oldest professions in the world, and from the way things are at the moment, it's not going anywhere. In 2008, journalists Nigel Brennan and Amanda Lindhout were kidnapped by Somali pirates while they were interviewing people over there. The hostage ordeal went on for over 15 months, where the pirates demanded a ransom of $1 million. They were finally freed after about 440 days. But this incident teaches us two things. One, that pirates are still a major threat to the world. And two, that your parents were probably right when they said that engineering is a safer career option as compared to journalism. So today we've seen that though times may change, mighty sailboats may turn to small dinghies, romanticized legends to pests, swords and swagger to mechanized gunfire. Just like insurance and the Queen, piracy is here to stay. That's it from us. Thank you for staying till the end of the talk.